This is Albania's last passenger train, consisting of just one completely destroyed passenger carriage hauled by an old Soviet-era locomotive that's more than 50 years old. Join me today for an extreme ride on Albania's last passenger train. We'll be traveling inside this completely destroyed passenger carriage, without windows or a solid floor. Starting at the very basic railway station in Durrës, we'll be traveling along this old and very bouncy railway line to a small town called Peqin. This was probably the most interesting train ride I took in 2025.
My name is Simon, and today we are catching the last passenger train left here in Albania.
We begin our journey today at the Durrës Beach railway station, which is the only one in operation here in Albania's second largest city. The train line used to go all the way to the city centre, but the station there is currently closed as they are building a brand new railway line to Tirana, which hopefully eventually opens, but progress, as you'd expect here in the Balkans, is very slow. Back here at the beach station, this is the starting point for the only active passenger railway service in Albania, except the train isn't running at the moment actually, and the passenger train schedule in Albania is in general very strange. We'll get to that later in the video, but now let's first have a look around the station. Well, there really isn't much here except the train and the container that acts as a ticket office, which was just watched by two guys who were not able to sell me a ticket but just sitting on chairs outside. Eventually a lady turned up who was able to sell me a ticket, which for the full journey down to Peqin cost just 95 lek or about €1. I mean, geographically we're not going very far, but this is still a very cheap train ticket. And with our ticket secured, let's go and check out the train itself. And wow, I've ridden some trains in the Balkans before that were in a terrible state, but I think this takes the crown as the most damaged one. These are second-hand Halberstadt carriages originally introduced by the East German Railway in the 70s and 80s. These were later acquired second-hand by the Albanian railways and are now in a pretty terrible condition, with almost every window either completely smashed or covered with graffiti, and the few spots without graffiti, well, that's where the windows have been completely blown out. I hope the interior is better. Hauling our train is this Czechoslovak-built T669 shunter from the Czechody works in Prague. This is one of the most constructed locomotives anywhere in the world, with more than 8,000 examples being built from the late 60s up to the early 90s. They were built in many variations and were exported all over Eastern Europe and to much of the former Soviet Union. While they were mostly built just for shunting duties, it did occur, and is also the case here in Albania, that they are used on revenue-earning passenger services. Right, let's head on board and check out the interior, where I'd say it's actually in slightly better shape than the exterior. Most of the seats are intact, and they seem to have gotten a new fabric covering at some point since the 80s. And you know, we can help out a little to make sure the seats are still presentable. I've ridden some old and tired trains before, but not quite ones where the floor is disintegrating and the blown out windows are just chilling on the luggage rack. In the end, I grabbed a seat next to one of the completely blown out windows, and a couple of minutes before departure, the driver started to turn on the engine. And just a couple of moments later, we are off, departing Durrës Beach Station 4 minutes early at 14:56, slowly making our way out of the station. Our train sounds its deafening horn multiple times as we cross the unguarded level crossing just beyond the station. And as we now trundle out of Durrës, let's take a closer look at the route map for today's journey. We are catching train number 7 from Durrës Beach, which makes a couple of intermediate stops on its 40-kilometer long route to Peqin. The trip is scheduled to take 1 hour and 37 minutes, giving the train an average speed of 25 kilometers per hour. The train used to carry on all the way to Albania's 4th largest city, Elbasan, but seemingly something broke along the way and the service has now been cut short to Peqin. Our ride out of Durrës is pretty slow, with our train getting up to a relaxed 32 kilometers per hour. The train is not very busy today, and I think I counted about 3 other passengers on board. Eventually, we switched the houses of the city for a bit more of nature before arriving at our first station stop. This is Golem, a small beach town just south of Durrës, home to about 7,000 people. And as no one was getting on or off the train here, we just stopped for a few seconds before our little locomotive began to accelerate again. For being just a shunter, it sure makes a lot of noise. As we now head into the countryside, we really get to see just how unmaintained this railway line is. With lots of tree and bushes growing very close to the track, you really had to be careful sitting next to the window, as they would just poke through at random times. And speaking of the seats, they are basic but pretty comfortable. First of all, they got a nicely padded armrest, among one of the better ones I've seen. And sure, most of these seats are completely falling apart, but if you get one where the padding hasn't completely collapsed, they are actually pretty comfortable. I can't say that the seats in general were in good condition, but I did try to pick some of the better ones. Our next stop is Kavajë, one of the bigger stations on today's trip. It's a historic town with a long past, known for its role in Albania's early independence movements. It's also seemingly a staff station, with a guy handing our driver some paperwork. As all the signals are broken on this railway line, I have to assume this is some kind of permission to proceed, because while we were the only passenger train service operating in the country at the time, a few freight trains do still run on the network. Despite us now having made a couple of stops, the train hasn't gotten any busier, but we did get up to a whopping 38 kilometers per hour. I was having a pretty good time on board. I mean, it's not a great public transport service, but from a guy who likes trains, trundling along in a carriage that's completely wrecked, where you could just stand behind the locomotive or watch out the back of the train, it is pretty fun. And I appreciated all the cleaning supplies being left at the rear of the train, ensuring that every passenger could see that this train gets regularly cleaned. Speaking of things that should be clean, let's go have a look at the toilet. It's safe to say this was not in the greatest condition either. But hey, the lock works. And that's about it really, with the flushing mechanism completely gone. And the sink itself and the water tap, I don't think this has worked for a few years at best. We are now coming up on what's probably the most important stop along the route, but first we make an unscheduled stop. I don't know what was going on here, but there seems to be a lot of turkeys. And moving a minute or two away from the unscheduled stop, we arrive at our actual station stop. This is Rrogozhinë, a junction station with the line heading towards southern Albania, where our train actually is supposed to have a timed connection with another passenger train. So let's talk about passenger trains in Albania. Albania in 2025, at least on paper, has a pretty extensive railway network, but it is in various stages of disrepair with many of these lines only seeing occasional use by freight trains, if any at all. Passenger services is where it gets tricky. For a couple of years, a service between Gjorme and Skøtter has operated once a week between March and June. Then in June, the train we are catching usually resumes just running on weekends, but sometimes also Fridays and Mondays. Finally, there's also supposed to be a shuttle train down to Locomotive that connects with our train, but that hasn't run this year and is currently listed as under maintenance on the official website. So there you have it, Albania's railway network. 2 sporadic services that just runs for a couple of months and then disappears. We're now heading for the final bit of our journey to Peqin. And if you have enjoyed this video so far, make sure you are subscribed to the channel, and if you want to show a little extra support, consider joining the membership program, where you get access to exclusive travel updates and early access to all my videos for just a couple of euros every month. Honestly, I'm surprised they keep this train going. The carriages are really holding on for their last life, and the state of the tracks these trains have to operate on, I'm surprised we're not hearing about derailments in Albania every week. It really must be extremely difficult operating a railway here, given the state of the tracks and the trains themselves. And as this train service terminated in October or November, Albania is once again currently without passenger railway service, probably till March, where the train up by Skøtter might start running again. But despite these extremely rough operating conditions, I've had an interesting journey today, seeing parts of Albania I otherwise probably wouldn't. And as we arrive into Peqin, things got very interesting. First of all, an ambulance pulled up next to our train, and then we proceeded to overshoot the platform. And the old ladies on board the train were not prepared to jump down to the ground, so our train was reversed back into the station.
Okay, bravo.
Good.
Thank you.
Well, that was for sure an interesting journey. I can't say I recommend taking this train unless you really like trains or you just want to experience pure Balkan railway chaos. Anyway, from here in Peqin, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this. I try to upload every Sunday. You can also join the channel membership if you want to support the channel a little extra. But most of all, thank you for watching.